Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing Time Division from Heidelberg. Time Division is a two-player, card-driven battle of the minds. In this game, you're trying to get as many points as possible into your influence area over here. So for example, and I'll show you one of the decks over here, we'll be going through things, but effectively, these cards over here have numbers on them, and that means that these numbers, if they're in your influence area, they're worth that many points. But you see, the cards also have abilities, and you might utilize the ability to do something on the card instead. Generally, when you play a card, you're either utilizing its points or its ability, and who has control over that, well, that's a different story. But the game is going to give you 3 decks over here. I'm going to show you one of the decks over here, the starter intro deck, and we'll walk through how to play the game with this deck over here. But each deck comprises of 18 cards, and from those 18 cards, by the time you begin the game, you're going to have 6 cards, your opponent will have 6 cards, and you'll have 6 cards off to the side. There's a bunch of areas over here of the board. There's your influence area, there's this little area here, there's the past over here, there's a bunch of different active areas. I don't remember all the names of all of them, but effectively, you'll have 6 cards set off to the side, your opponent will have 6 cards, and you will have 6 cards. But you're doing that with a draft. Effectively, you're going to pick 3 cards, your opponent will pick 3 cards from this deck of 18, so you have 6 cards in motion effectively, and then you're going to go ahead and take a look over here. We'll actually probably put them over here, I believe. You're going to go ahead and take a look at these cards, and you'll say, you know what, I think I want the archer over here. Or do I want the archer? Yeah, I want the archer over here because I think it's a fun card. I'll give you the potter, and I'm going to put this off to the side. That's going to be the first draft, okay? So I know one of your cards, I know one of my cards, and I know one card off to the side. Now you're going to do the same thing, except I don't know this. So you'll give 1 card to me, you'll take 1 card for yourself, which I don't know, and you'll put 1 card to the past, which I don't know. So right about now, after a single round, I know one of your cards, I know both of mine, and I know 1 card of the past. And you have the same information. We're both missing 1 piece of information. I'm missing the card you kept, and I'm missing the card you put in the past. You're going to repeat that 3 more times. Well, that's not true. You're going to repeat that 2 more times. So now we'll do the exact same thing, but again, 3 cards over here to you. You're going to go ahead and take 1 for yourself. You're going to put 1 in the past, and 1 to me, which I will go ahead and look at. I'll take a look at 3 cards myself. We're doing this simultaneously over here, and I'll go ahead and I know I have that over there, which that doesn't help me over there. That's not going to help me there. I'm going to go ahead and give you the charioteer over here, but you know that right now, so I'm going to give you this, and I'll put this guy into my hand and this guy into the past. Okay, great. We're going to repeat that cycle. So 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, and then I'll take a look and see. And I think I will hold on to this one over here, and I'll give you that, and I'll put this one here. Okay, there we go. We now have our starting intro draft. We're resolved. We each have 6 cards, and we each have some information as far as what's going on. Now, this is where you have a coin over here, and the coin's going to determine who plays first. Now, I'm going to go ahead and play the opponent's hand randomly, because that's the best way to kind of simulate how this plays out over here. But effectively, we're going to have them take 1 card over here, and they're going to put 1 card down over here onto their board. Now, because they have the coin, they play first. And arguably, they shouldn't have played randomly. This is the trouble trying to teach you a game that wouldn't be played randomly. But because they play that card, this card effectively says that they're going to take a card from my influence area and put it into the past. Okay, so the red always means your opponent, blue always means you. But they're going to take a card from my influence area and move it to the past, which again is a terrible card because there's no influence area. But let's pretend for the sake of, the conversation that I already had an 8 in my influence area, and they already had a card in their influence area, or they'd have a card in the past from a previous round. This will all make sense more shortly. But effectively, so I have a card in my influence area, they're trying to take it, and they're removing my 8 from play. But they played first because they had the coin, and I'm going to go ahead and counter by playing this card over here. I'm going to play the Priest of Horus, which says over here that I'm going to go ahead and take the 5 from their active area. Oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. They're taking the card from my area over here, not my influence area. That'd be this symbol. They're taking the card from my actual board, which is this symbol over here that you see here. So they're taking it there, they're going to move to the past. I'm responding by instead taking their card, except with a caveat, because this is where the game gets confusing. Honestly, the game's very confusing, but we have good things to say about it too. But effectively, once you play a card, so I've played the higher number card, which means I'm going to move the coin over here, and as the person with the coin, I will decide who gets the ability on their card and who gets the card, because that's going to be the way this operates. You're going to operate with the ability first and then the card, but it's one or the other. Meaning, because I have the higher number, I can choose whether I get the 8 and they get the ability, which would be bad for me because their ability would be taking my 8, or I can say that they get the 5, but I get the ability, and in this case, I'm going to do that because my ability says if they've played a 5, that's exactly what it says over here, if they play, let's go ahead and show you this over here. If my opponent has a 5 in their active area, I can put it into my influence area, which seems like a good ability because they wouldn't even get their 5 if I do that. So I'm going to go ahead and resolve that ability. I'm going to put this card into the past. I'm going to take their card, and I'm going to go ahead and add it to my area. hopefully it all made sense. I have the coin. Now it's my turn to play first. So I don't know what's in their hand. That's not entirely true. I know some of the things that's in the hand, but I'm going to try to go ahead and be a little tricky. So I'm going to go ahead and, do I dare do that? I don't want to do that. I will go ahead and I'm going to play this carpenter over here. So I'm going to play a carpenter over here. This guy says I'm going to take a card from these set aside cards here, and I'm going to put it into my influence area. Okay, that's what it says. Again, it's all blue. So this is the neutral area. I'm going to look through it as the blue player, and I'm going to go ahead, and to be clear, blue is not a blue player. Blue means you, red means your opponent. But my opponent, this is where I'm going to actually go ahead and look at my opponent's hand to see what they can respond to that with, because let's pretend they actually have information over here. They have this card, which would go higher, but they wouldn't get the ability. They have this card, which they wouldn't have a choice over who gets the ability, so not necessarily as good. This one says they can take a card from my hand and put it into, they can take a card from my hand and put it into the past over there. So, maybe I trade with the past. Let's see. They can swap a card with their hand from the past, sorry. And then this one says over here, this would be a 4, but I would choose, I think they're going to go ahead, I don't want them to have this ability over here. Oh my gosh, these are not the best. This 4 over here, though, that would force me to choose. Let's go ahead and play the stonemason. So right about now, we're going to play the stonemason. Let's talk through how that works over here. The stonemason effectively means that they can go ahead and they can take a look at a card in my hand. And let me just make sure I'm doing this correctly. Sorry, a card over here. They can take a card from this area set aside of cards, and they can trigger the ability on that card. I, on the other hand, am saying that I'm going to take the card. Now, the tricky part is, because they played the same number as me, the coin stays where it is. So now it's my choice. They've forced me into a hard decision. What choice do I want to make as far as, do I want to go ahead and take a card and score it, but then they get to activate a card, they get their 4. I think I'm going to do that, actually. I think I'm going to do that. I think that makes more sense. So I'm going to say that they go ahead and they get their 4, and they're going to put that in the area. And I'm going to take a card from here and score it. Let's see what we got over here. We got a 10. I think I'm going to go ahead and take that 10 and put it into my influence area. And this will go off to the past. That's basically the back and forth you're playing, but you're doing that across 6 plays. So again, the cycle of play effectively has that you're going to spend the round drafting your initial cards. You're going to draft your hand, your 6 cards, their 6 cards, and the ones set off to the side. And then across 6 plays, you're going to alternate between who gets the ability and who gets the card. It is a little confusing to follow. I'm not going to pretend it isn't, so if you didn't get all that, I understand. We'll talk about that in the review, which means it's a good time to move the review, almost though, because let's talk about the fact that there are 2 more decks, which I mentioned already. Each of these are self-contained decks of 18 cards, all with their own little back and forth. And as you can see as we played some of the cards, some of them are specific counters, like, hey, here's this 4 that's super powerful. But you also have to know that there's cards that block the 4 and steal it. So you have to kind of be aware of what's in play. Did you take a card that blocks the 4 yourself? Or you put it off to the side? You have to be aware that there's always some degree of knowledge and information as far as what's in play, and you can use cards to gather information. If I dig through the discard pile, I'll be able to go ahead and see which cards are out of play and have perfect information about what you have. So there's lots of little things you can do to maneuver, but that's basically how you play Time Division. Which means to review, starting off with ease of play. The rules aren't complicated on this game. The rules are a handful of pages. They're very straightforward. The iconography, while not difficult, makes for an incredibly confusing experience. I have played this game a bunch, and I still struggle. If you saw that first round, I played the game a bunch, and I'm still like, oh yeah, pulling a card from your influence area. Why? Because these are both vague triangle shapes, and the cards are all so repetitious in terms of what they do and how they operate. It's move a card from here to here, do a card from there to there, that I still make the mistake if I'm not paying perfect information. I am past the point where I need to reference the handy dandy little sheet that covers every single ability, because frankly you're going to need that when you start this game. You're going to want this set off to the side over here where everyone can see it, because you will need to go through those rules for each of the sets when you start playing. But I'm past that point, but I'm still at the point where I make mistakes, or I forget, or I have to double check and triple check. It's not intuitive. The iconography is not hard, but it's not intuitive, and it makes for a confusing, messy experience when most of the things are move a card from here to here, but also these symbols are all kind of vague. They successfully made this game language independent at the cost of making it an easier to play experience, so I'm not entirely sure if that's a win. Now again, I have lots of good things to say about the game, but the iconography is going to be a big sticking point. The ease of play is going to be a big sticking point for me on this. As far as game time, you can knock out a game in maybe 15 minutes once you know it's up and running. You can move through this fairly quickly. I don't even know what the box is. The box says 20 to 60 minutes. I have to assume the 60 is if you're doing the full arc of 3, because there's a way you can do a full arc of all 3 as well. I can't imagine this game ever being 60 otherwise, but the 20 minutes sounds about right. This is a fast moving game, so easy to play, not good on the rules, good on the time, not so great on the accessibility. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, and this is where I'll talk about all the things I like about the game, because there are things I like about the game. I am both very impressed by aspects of this game while also being critical at the same time. But as far as things I like, building your opponent's deck while building your own, working towards that perfect set where you can go ahead and perfectly plan about which card is going to show up against which cards and plan around that kind of back and forth, that is a rewarding experience. It's a fun system. The first game maybe not as much, but by the time you move on to the second and third game and you have an understanding of what cards are in play, that initial pre-game draft, well, not pre-game draft, in-game draft to set yourself up is a very rewarding experience. It's a lot of fun. I like the way that you know perfect information on your own hand, obviously, but you know half of what's set aside to the discard and half of what your opponent has, and you have to deduce what are the other 6 cards in play and how badly can they mess with you if they come at the wrong time. This game has a lot of thinking through that initial draft, but then also lots of clever play opportunities as you play. Every card has a counter. Every card has a way that you have to think through, well, if I play this, I'll have the higher card, so I have control, but they can respond by this, or they can do this, or we can do that. There's so many ways you can force your opponent to react to what you do that this ends up being an incredibly intricate and clever experience once you understand how to play. And there's multiple decks for variety's sake, and you can play them in a full campaign arc as well. And so you have a lot of flexibility around the game systems, a lot of customization of variety from the decks themselves. Not customization, I lied. A lot of variety from the decks themselves, and incredibly intricate and rewarding play once you understand the cards and the systems. And I still don't consider myself fully there, to be clear. I've played this enough that I recognize and see the clever play. I've had fun feeling clever as I've played, and I am still constantly looking at the card you just played and being like, okay, that does that, so I guess this does that. It's still a slow process for me. I still feel like I'm reading through hieroglyphics because I can get to the end goal, but I'm still pausing and absorbing time and time again, so I am enjoying the clever play with things in the way. So I guess the short version of things I liked is I think it's a great pregame draft, and I think there's very clever play opportunities once this system is easy to go through. As far as things I don't like, I don't know if it's I think it's pretty obvious from the way I'm talking so far, but I can't stand the iconography. I think the iconography is very obtuse, hard to see through, hard to understand. What in the world does that card do? I mean, like, you know the play areas, right? Okay, so this play area is your deck, your card in play. This over here is going to be, you know, the set-aside card. This over here is your opponent's play area. And this over here is your, your influence. So what do you think this card does? Because the answer is you put this card, meaning this card itself, goes to the set-aside area. And then next turn, you're going to go ahead and take your opponent's played card and put it into your influence. I can read that. I just need to process it every single time. And that's... The iconography is so obtuse, it really gets in the way of the experience, and it's hard to play a game that's entirely about the mind puzzle of trying to think, you know, what are you going to do, how am I going to do it? It's hard to play that when you don't know the cards well enough, meaning until you really know the system. I think it takes like 3 to 4 plays with each deck just to understand and feel like a sense of control, and it probably takes like, you know, 5 to 10, if not more, to really get a good sense of really owning the experience. And because of that, that means the new player experience, meaning I've played this game with one person, to be very clear. I've played it with one person multiple times, but I played this with one person. And part of that is because if I played this with a new person, I would have to play like 5 times before we were even on par level of playing fields, because as we're getting into the 4th play or whatnot, they'd be on their first few plays, I'd be diving into play number 7, and it would not be a pleasant experience. I am not in a rush to teach this game to new people because I think it takes several games to get a feel for it, which just puts that disparity between players as something that's not great. Basically, I really like the game. I like the game. I think it's a really clever game here, but I think it asks me to commit a lot of time to it, and it asks me to then level the playing field with whoever I'm playing against in a way that just doesn't feel like a rewarding experience. As far as I can see others not liking, I'm going to say the iconography again. I usually don't put things in the same category twice, but the iconography is bad. It's not bad. It's not. You can figure it out really quickly, but the intuitiveness of it is not present. And I'll say that in general, you know, this is a game where very often you're playing cards that have abilities and, you know, high values and whatnot. And you often get the sense or the feel that you want both out of it, and you can't. And that's something you have to get over. It's something that's not a satisfying experience to be like, look at this super cool ability I just played. Oh, I'm going to get 4 points and not through the ability. That will happen to you along the game, and that sense might be frustrating until you get used to it, so that's another thing worth mentioning. As far as final thoughts on Time Division, I think there's a really good game here. Like, genuinely, this game gives me some really clever clever moments, of good play opportunities that allow me to feel clever, I think there's a good game here. But for me, rating-wise, this is a 3 out of 5. I can happily look back, I can move past this game, never play it again, and not really have any strong regrets, because while it does some things really, really well, I don't feel it's a game that would hit the table. I think that I think there's a good game hidden behind things that are in the way. I hope I'm making myself clear. I both really appreciate the gameplay, and I don't know if I can recommend it, because I think for most people, I can recommend it if you are someone who's going to play this game with the same partner, 10, 15 times. By all means, I think this is a great game that will be very rewarding. But I think if you're trying to introduce it to multiple people, or if you don't play all your games 10 to 15 times, then I think this is a game that just has too many things in the way while still having a good game behind it. So a 3 out of 5. I still think a lot of good things are going on here, and I don't need to play it again. As far as other game recommendations, if you want that sense of two-player, just complete mind games as you try to figure things out and try to get into your opponent's heads, I think that few games beat Air, Land, and Sea. I personally like the Critters at War version, but Air, Land, and Sea is a fantastic game, which gives you the same premise. 18 cards, your 6, you can figure out kind of what's going on a bit. Very similar premise, just a much more rewarding, more accessible experience. And if you want that little pre-game draft kind of exercise, if you want that experience of trying to force your opponent to bad choices, Hanamakoji is going to be another two-player game that gives you that sense of trying to force your opponent into hard choices, similar to the way the pre-game draft forces a degree of control over the game in Time Division. That's basically it. That's my review of Time Division. I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this review helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.